episode 134 of the podcast. I asked for episode topics and you guys answered. So this week we'll talk about dogs who bark, dogs who scream, dogs who whine in the grooming setting. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. Barking, whining, screaming, and generally being noisy is such a common problem during grooming, but it's also a common problem at home. I'm really surprised that I never even thought to talk about it here, but I'm so happy that I asked you guys for topics. Always feel free to throw topics my way. I find inspiration that way. So what should we start with here? Let's start with, why is the dog being noisy? Why is the dog making noise? Because not all barking, whining, or screaming is the same. It won't be the same answer for every dog, every situation, or even every occurrence. So non-dog trainers sometimes find this frustrating. At first, just give me the answer. Oh my God, what do I do to make him stop? You're a trainer, right? So let's talk about that for a minute. As a trainer, when I hear things like, what do I do when he's barking? It's a little bit like when I'm a groomer and I hear, I just don't want him shaved. Well, what do you want him to look like? Well, I don't want him to look like a poodle. Okay, so groomers, I want you to start thinking, oh, right, that is not helpful at all when people say what they don't want. And we need to use that same mindset in training where we're thinking, okay, well, I don't want him to do this. Okay, and that gives me part of what I need to know, but I want to know, what do you want this dog to be doing? And we also need to figure out why he's doing it. So just an idea in there for you guys to be thinking about, that it's never going to be, oh, barking? Well, we just do this. I listened to a 20-minute podcast and now everything's solved. Oh, man, wouldn't that be great? If it were that easy, there would not be the field of dog training. So, take a deep cleansing breath and let that wash over us for a second. Every dog's going to be different. Now, let's talk about some of the reasons and situations where dogs may be noisy. Now, one of those, the dog wants to be with the owner. That one's the dog that barks a lot being dropped off, right? They're like, hey, I thought we were going for a ride. I thought we were just going for a ride. They're barking, but it's not necessarily panic barking. It's more of a, I just want to be with you. Now there's another one here, afraid of the surroundings. Like, this is the dog who's under-socialized or unprepared. And we're seeing so much of this right now because of so many dogs who during COVID weren't being brought various places. That some of them don't have much experience with being dropped off or being around a grooming setting. Even for those of us who are grooming in our homes and only do one dog at a time, even for those of us who are house call, just that these dogs are not well prepared for anything new. And sometimes they're the ones who are making a lot of noise. They're like, I don't understand what's happening. I know I'm being very anthropomorphic today, but let's think about from their point of view. That's a very different motivation than, wait, Mom, don't leave me. I'm also going to add here, the don't leave me isn't the same as separation anxiety. I hear separation anxiety being used as a term way too frequently. Anxiety is serious. Anxiety is not just, I'm separation sad or I want to be with my owner, right? Anxiety is really different. So separation anxiety is not nearly as common as people like to think it is. What we usually see are dogs that just haven't been taught how to be alone. It is so normal for a dog to want to be with us. So normal. I'm actually a little bit more worried about the dogs that are like, yeah, don't let the door hit you on the way out. I don't care. Whatever. If they haven't been taught how to be alone, that's weird. So we're seeing a lot of dogs that aren't used to being dropped off. Now that can turn into anxiety because now they're not sure what to do. And if we allow them to circle into a panic, then it can turn into anxiety. But true separation anxiety is also medical. So I need you to really think, is this dog just sad because they're being left? Is this dog just unprepared, overwhelmed? Now, here is another thing. This one is, are they afraid of a procedure or a tool? This is more of the please stop. The dog who's been pretty quiet for everything else, but now they're being noisy because they want us to stop with a clipper or a dryer or like picking up a front foot or touching their ears, right? It's something very specific to a procedure or a tool. Here is another one. I'm just listing off a variety of different reasons why dogs could be noisy, barky, screaming. Another one, they can just be barking at or with other dogs. So sometimes other dogs are the reason why dogs are being barky, being loud, being noisy. Now that could be playful, that could be aggressive, or it could be anything in between. And it could depend on which dog walks past them. They might be aggressively barking to one dog while playfully barking at another. But that's a different type of noisiness. That could be just communicating with another dog. Now, I'm not saying any of these are okay in the grooming setting. Certainly we don't want dogs carrying on. But to understand that there are different motivations that would require different instruction. Now, here is another one. Not used to being crated. This is the dog that as soon as they don't have hands on them is like, hey, somebody let me out, let me out, let me out. They closed the door behind me. Ah. Now that could be a dog who's stressed. That could be a dog who's just request barking, like, hey, you. Oh, she left. Oh, wait, open the door. Oh, they forgot me here, So, again, very anthropomorphic today. But those are all a little bit different. Now, here is another one that I'm going to list off too, because I know one of my own guys does this one. Every new person or new dog that walks in is an opportunity to like, hey, did you know this guy's here? Hey, just wanted you to know I'm here, The doorbell barking, right? The somebody's in the waiting room, somebody just stepped in the office, that kind of bark. Now, some of this barking, I think, is pretty normal, and we're never really expecting to have a day with no barking. It would be nice. Oh, wouldn't that be nice? Let's just pause and think about that for a minute. But when it becomes excessive is when there's a problem. We would like to have a dog that, even if they do start making noise, can stop again when asked. But I want you to think about step 2. That was step 1. Why is the dog barking or making noise or screaming or whining? Step 2, where do we start? Where do we start for this? Now, I want you to be thinking about running that behavior through our filter of the 3 C's: calm, comfortable, and cooperative. So my first thought, basically anytime I'm seeing a dog barking or whining or crying or screaming or any of those things, my first thought is, that's not calm. Very rarely would I ever think that any of that is calm, right? But from there, I also want you to start thinking, but is that dog comfortable? Is this discomfort or is this recreational? Some dogs are going to be really, really comfortable. They're like, hey, bark, 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 bark. I'm having myself a great time. I'm singing the song of my people. I'm barking up a storm. This is wonderful, And then some dogs are barking because they're uncomfortable. Now, are they being cooperative? That one's tricky too, because there are times where a dog is just bark, bark, bark. They're barking at everything that walks by, but they are actually holding still for you, and they are actually allowing you to do your job. And they're not particularly uncomfortable. They're just having themselves a good old time in a way that we absolutely do not approve of. We do not approve. So when you think about calm, comfortable, cooperative, then it becomes a little bit clearer what my next thought's going to be, right? What's my next step? my next step is to calm them down. Calm them down. Find a way to like, hey, whoa, shh, dude, hey, can you calm down? I don't know why I say dude, but I tend to like, hey, dude, shh, hey, can I calm you down again? And if they are uncomfortable, can I help them become comfortable while I'm also trying to calm them down? Now, calming them down might be like, okay, let's just stand together for a second, move that tool away, or turn that sound off, or lower that sound, and just like a couple slow, deep breaths together. Like, listen, you're all right. You're okay. Now, you might think that's a lot of talking, but I do a lot of talking with the dogs. I chat with them, unless I find that it makes it worse. But for so many dogs, it has served me well that it's become my go-to. Then I'm like, hey, buddy, are you all right? Can you calm down for me? Because think about it. This is the way many, many dogs interact with their humans at home. It's familiar versus the more kind of we're just going to be quiet and do our jobs, which for some dogs becomes familiar, but it's a little bit different than what they live with at home. So if I'm trying to calm a dog down, I'm like, hey, shh, slow petting. I lower my voice a little bit. I joke around that it's the 3 a.m. smooth jazz radio voice. Hey, buddy, everything's gonna be fine. And I might slow down a little bit what I'm doing, even if that means that like I'm brushing at a slower pace, or I'm massaging soap into their body at a slower pace. Just slow things down can help a dog calm down, just the tempo. Or it could be lowering the volume of the sound levels around us. And if you think about calming them down, you can also watch for, is this dog calming down? This individual, because they're all going to be different. For some dogs, as a thought for you, because things become noisy, for some dogs, I find that if it's a noisy environment and we really can't control how much noise there is, sometimes adding some calming music to that noise level can be helpful. Somehow it kind of drowns out some of the sharpness of some of the other sounds to have some music going. So kind of counterintuitive, because wouldn't adding more noise to a noisy environment be bad? But sometimes you can add some music to help soften the levels of noise. I find for a lot of dogs, if they're trying to calm down, being alone doesn't help. So some dogs you'll be like, you know what, let's put you in a crate, let you calm down. But for others, they kind of need hands on them to help them calm down. And sometimes that's a good time to be brushing, frankly, unless that's something they can't handle. But for a lot of dogs, they calm down better in my hands than they do if I take them off the table and like give them a break. Play it by ear. Look at the individual dog, because there are lots of reasons why dogs would become noisy and become anxious or over-aroused or overstimulated. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes, and tell all of your friends. I want you to also think about the things that we say when we want a dog to be quiet. One of the things that I hear people doing a lot of is no bark, or quiet, Here's the problem with that. I think when we say things like no bark, we're assuming that the dog knows what that means. It's a reprimand. It's meant to decrease the behavior. Right? Now we're getting into punishment, something that decreases the barking. And most dogs, while they might hear it at home, have not been taught to be quiet. So therefore, I know, following that rabbit trail, therefore, if it does not reduce the behavior, we're just adding angry sounds to a dog who's already frustrated and stressed. Now, what do I mean by that? So if I have a dog on the table who's, bark, 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 and I'm like, no bark, no, and the dog's like, bark, 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 no, bark, 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 no, right? It just keeps circling back. circling back, and you're both getting frustrated. There's a frustrated human and a frustrated dog, and neither of you know what's going on with the other one. Now, one of the ways that I can illustrate that for those of us who kind of need to get a feel for what I mean, if while you are telling a dog, no, no bark, and he's barking at you and you're telling him, no, no bark, you might feel like you're being stern, like he has to respect me. But it's not about respect. What it is we're trying to decrease a behavior, which is a punishment mindset, right? That's what punishment is. It's to decrease behavior. But if it's not working, then it's really just adding more stress. If I were to go over to you while you were doing that, and you're like, no, no bark, and the dog's like, bark, 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 no, no bark, and you guys are having this argument, this fight over on the other side of the room, and if I came over and said, no, don't do that, no, don't tell him no bark, you'd be thinking pretty much immediately, well, what do you want me to do? Right? Now, think about it. That would be the response, right? Well, what do you want me to do? Because I've heard this response before. Like, what am I supposed to do then? I can't just let him bark, right? But that's the exact kind of frustration that dog is going through at the same time. You're both, you as a person who's trying to say no, no bark, and the dog who's like, bark, 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 which is basically the dog's equivalent of, no, don't touch me, don't do that thing. You're just getting frustrated and frustrated. I want you to be thinking, instead of relying on something like no, no bark, circle back to the 3 C's. Is this dog calm? Nope. Can I help him be calm? Is this dog comfortable? Can I help him be comfortable? Is dog cooperating with me? What can I do to help this dog cooperate with me? And because we've already explained a safety policy to our owners, we can also let go of the idea that this dog has to be perfect, because we've already explained safety to them. If their dog isn't well prepared for our services, then we cannot give them the beautiful, perfect trim that they might want today. We can work on their behavior so that we might be able to do it next time. But be thinking about those words that we're saying. If a dog doesn't know what they are, it's not going to be helpful. Here is another part of that. But owners say no. They say it all the time. They tell him no bark at home. Now, as a dog trainer who goes into people's homes, and has been for a long, long time, I can tell you most people will say, oh, he barks because he's stubborn. He knows better. I tell him no, but he barks anyway. Or I tell him no bark when he barks like that, but he's stubborn. And I ask them, how did you teach him this cue of no bark? And they said, teach him? Yeah, because what most owners are doing is they're chanting no bark while a dog barks. They have not taught a darn thing, and it's not because they're bad people. This isn't a judgment call. But that dog, I don't assume that dog knows what no bark means just because that's what the owners say a lot of. In fact, many, many times to prove this point, if I'm in an owner's house, I'll walk up to a window while their dog's being quiet. Their dog's off in the kitchen. I walk up to a window and say, no bark, and the dog comes charging in to bark. Because it is literally, barking has been named no bark. Just as clearly as picking up your keys and saying, want to go for a ride. Like, if that's what always happens next, then that's what they start pairing it with. They're paired no bark with barking. So sometimes owners have actually taught something. Ask them. And it's okay if you observe an owner and they tell you they've worked on something and you try to do what the owner says they do at home. Just keep in mind, if it's not working, you're just adding stress. You're not working toward calm, comfortable, and cooperative if you're saying the same things they say at home and the dog is not decreasing that behavior. If the dog is still carrying on, then it wasn't helpful. Now, there are plenty of people who've actually taught something like hush, quiet, no bark. And if that is the case, use whatever word they have taught and see if it works for that dog in your grooming situation. Okay? I don't care what word they picked. They could call it apple or spoon. Who cares? If that's the word that their dog knows and actually responds to, then I think there's a place for us to do an owner impression. Now, one last thing about owner impressions. If an owner yells at their dog to knock it off and it actually works, it is not really my favorite thing. I'm going to get thrown out of all of the training groups that I'm part of, and half of the groomers out there are going to want to hate me. But be thinking, if that is actually something the dog knows, leave it open in your mind that it's a possibility for you to go ahead and just give that a try once. Like a dog that's carrying on and you come over and you're like, knock it off! And in a way that you normally wouldn't, right? Like that's not my go-to. But once in a while, I will do an owner impression just to see if it actually works. Because you know what? If it does work, that dog is now being quiet. And that's less stressful for that dog and the other dogs around them and the other people around them, frankly, because it's a loud environment. Once one dog gets going, some other dog might become very frightened because there's, some dude barking 3 cages down the way, or that guy on the table across from me is barking at me and I'm totally freaking out. So anthropomorphic today. Assigning human emotions to dogs when we don't really know what they're thinking. But I think that it helps to illustrate the point. So be thinking about the dogs that are barking as dogs that need help calming down. And that barking is natural. So it's not necessarily that they're trying to ruin anyone's day. It's not necessarily aggressive. It's not necessarily fear. There are so many different things that can cause a dog to bark or scream or whine. And we need to be thinking about, okay, how can I run this through the 3 C's? Now, occasionally you see video of, and it's usually a husky, screaming in a tub while people dry it. And again, think about the 3 C's. Some dogs just like making a lot of noise. Some of those dogs just truly are just singing the song of their people, and they're not actually screaming, they're howling and having themselves a silly time. Others are truly stressed out. Some of those videos really make me want to jump through the screen and say, whoa, 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 okay, let's turn the dryer off. Oh, please, 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 you're really stressing this dog out. And then other dogs are really just fine with it. So again, every dog is different. What we need to look at is the individual and if we're helping them be calm, comfortable, and cooperative. If you'd like more information, you can find me at chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.